are live, everybody, and welcome to this week's eLearning Career Chat. For those of you who have not joined us before, let me just do a quick housekeeping note. These sessions are completely informal and unplanned. Heidi and I have only been talking for the past 10 minutes prior to joining the session, and so we don't have any pre-planned content. We're just going to have a nice casual conversation about interviewing in L&D. However, what we want to do is make sure you get your questions answered. So while Heidi and I are talking and talking about interviewing and interviewing tips, you'll notice at the top of the chat panel to the right, there's a little bubble with a question mark in it. So you can click on that and you can submit questions to us, and you can upvote on other people's questions. So about halfway through, we'll transition to that and we'll start tackling those questions that received the most upvotes. So, and by the way, I should tell this to everybody, I am at a conference this week in Salt Lake City for ATD's International Conference, and I'm in the general area. So if you see people moving around or you hear voices, it's just there's people here at the conference. So with that being said, hi Heidi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And it's always good to know that if you hear voices, that other people also hear them.
Yeah, means you're not crazy, hopefully. So, Heidi, gosh, I was trying to this morning before we were getting on, I was thinking about how long we've known each other. I don't even remember the first time we met. I don't know if it was when I came out to Kansas City and I did a workshop with you a few years ago, or did we meet at conferences before then? I don't remember.
I think we probably met at one of the conferences, but probably because I was fangirling. And probably came up to ask you some questions because you do such a great job. And at the time I was trying to learn storyline. And then I think too, you and I are both Twitter users and in social media, and in doing that, I appreciated your openness to asking questions and answering them. And so being able to develop that relationship and by the time that I had the opportunity to have you come up and see us in Kansas City, by then we were old friends, and it was really great.
Yeah, well, good. Well, so why don't we start? Tell everybody a little bit about what you do for a living, the team that you manage and lead, and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a training manager for Terracon. We are an engineering consulting firm, and so we have folks that go out and do all kinds of testing with concretes and soils and all of those kinds of things. I have a team of 3 instructional designers that report to me, and also the learning technology analyst who runs our LMS and who is filling requests for me all the time when I said, I want numbers to show this so that we can go do other kind of work. Our team as a whole is 10 members. We have a director, and then we also have 3 ODs that work in tandem with our team in a little bit of a non-traditional OD role, because they really are kind of working towards change management of whatever that my team is pushing out into the organization. So whether it be new software or a new policy or process, or just trying to improve something, they will work as a team in order to pull that across the line.
Okay. So tell me, I'm curious to know, how long have you been working in like a leadership function within L&D, managing teams of instructional designers and e-learning designers? How long have you been doing that?
So I've been at Terracon for 6.5 years, and I've probably been in a management role with that full team for about 5. Career-wise, I have a few years on me, so I've been in the industry for a long time. I've also been part of like a one-stop shop or a 2-person team, which in some ways has been an advantage. Then now that I have this focus group of designers, because I've done their work. The reason I met you was because I was trying to learn storyline to add to my own toolbox and help push where I was forward. So I've managed small, like been part of a 2, and now have 3. We would love to have another, but we'll have to see the way the wind blows from the company to see if we'll continue to add to the team.
Yeah, well, good. Well, so, I've, before I started my own business and started doing that full time, I managed a team of almost 18 instructional designers from as far west as Seattle and to far east as Munich, Germany. It was a lot of work. And a big portion of my time was interviewing people for instructional design roles and e-learning roles and other L&D roles within the organization. And I think it's one of those things, especially people who are, there's so many people right now trying to transition into this industry, and they don't even know, let alone what a good interview looks like for an instructional design or e-learning role. But many of these folks have never even worked a private sector or corporate job, and they're coming maybe from the public sector, which I've worked in the public sector before for 13 months, and that interviewing process and experience is totally different.
Way different.
Yeah, and so I'd love to know. I don't have a specific question, but I would love to know, as a hiring manager,
Yep.
what is it like? What's the thing you're looking for? Like when you walk out of that interview room and go, "That was a good interview." What does that look like to you?
I'm going to give you a squishy answer.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you it looks like whatever it is that fits that role for what that manager and what that job description said the main part of the job would be. So right now in instructional design, or some people are saying that nope, their role is a instructional experience. Okay, still, what are the tasks and the roles that they want you to have? I mean, the role of instructional designer right now, it could mean 10 different things. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the case of a place that is looking for, and I put in there, I need you to be able to do participant guides or instructor guides. If I'm interviewing there, I am going to ask those initial questions. So you are doing a lot of face-to-face training or ILT, or are you doing a lot of virtual instructor led? Designing for those things are slightly different, as you know, as well as then, or are you trying to be an e-learning instructional designer, which is a whole different skill set and toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Or some of our friends and folks that we learned from as well that have jumped over that line and they are doing AR or they are
Yep.
looking at virtual. So the first thing I think you want to do when you look at those role descriptions is to look and see what is it that you're actually asking people to design. Because if you're just coming into the field, where do you want to focus and what kind of job do you want to get? So for us at Terracon, we are rather e-learning heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you an example of a construction firm that I have colleagues that are on the north side of Kansas City that are completely video. She's
Yep.
hired 3 videographers because they are just going to go that route. And one of them has storyline. And so they tag our team because we've made friends and we make each other better. They'll tag us when they're trying to learn how to do it differently. But for
Sure.
our team, since it's e-learning, I'm looking to see your visual skills. So I'm still looking for the base stuff in instructional design. I want to know that you know learning concepts. I want to know that you are focused on the user and on that learner as opposed to what you personally like. Well, I kind of want to see your own style and what that looks like for you. I work in corporate America, so my personal style and what I personally like is less important than what me and my stakeholder like. And
Yep.
then even more important than that, what's the audience that they have and is it going to include that? So really, if I'm going to walk out of that room, Tim, I want to hear somebody that's talking to me and asking me questions more about who those people are and then giving me answers that tell me that they know how to match those things together,
Sure.
because that means we'll be able to deliver a learning product that is going to hit our target and we're going to get the results that we wanted to see.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And before I have something I want to say about that real quickly. For those of you who've just
Yeah.
joined us, don't forget you can click on the questions tab next to the chat tab and submit questions for Heidi or I about interviews, answering questions, resumes, portfolios, all the above. Um, and we'll tackle those here about halfway through.
Yeah.
So Heidi, I think one of the point you just made that I really like is that I think sometimes people, especially people who are new to this industry, they think the title instructional designer or learning experience designer or e-learning developer have these really, defined meanings within our industry. And the truth is they don't. Oftentimes, you can be called an e-learning developer designing instructor-led training for the classroom, depending on the project, or you could be a learning experience designer doing all sorts of different things. And
Yeah.
to your point, I think it's important to recognize that how a company, when they're interviewing for an instructional designer, for example, you might be an instructional designer focused on e-learning development. They've just decided that they're calling it an
Yeah.
instructional designer for whatever reason, and
Yeah.
maybe the role they're trying to fill is for e-learning development, right?
Yeah.
And so, to your point, I think there's two things. The onus is on the potential employee, the candidate, to make sure they're thoroughly reviewing the job description. But I also think, and this is just my little gripe, I think hiring managers and companies need to do a better job of writing good job descriptions that actually reflect what they're looking for, not just something they copy and pasted off of a Google search, right? Or that they've been
Right.
using for 10 years, right?
Yeah, but you and I both, we were inside of the industry when we were doing the work. So
Right.
you became an instructional design manager, having been an instructional designer. And it is not uncommon. And you mentioned ATD. You know, I'm a part of my local ATD chapter. So one, you guys should all know that that would be something I would tell you to do. And if it's not ATD, if it's another organization, I also do a lot of things with the Learning Guild and really appreciate what I get from there. But meet people and figure out who you can make connections with. And plus, I want to know that you're studying the industry. But we come from that. But I meet a lot of people at those events that they might have designers that report to them, but they've never done that work, or they did it 15 years ago. They don't pay attention to the technology because it's not what they're being asked to do in their job. So some days I would like to say that Tim and I, you and I had an edge. I'd like to say I have an edge. That because I've done the work, I look for different things, but I also look at my job description differently. So, you know, if you're only going to cut and paste, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of those job descriptions I've seen, I'm like, well, holy crap, let me get my magic wand and also be able to do these 25 other things, because it is literally a laundry list. And so that's why I say if you can get into those first interviews, those interviews are just as important, the questions that you ask, to figure out, is this place, am I going to shine here? Am I going to learn here? And then am I going to shine because I have this skill that they're looking for, but here's what else I'd be able to do.
Yep.
Because it's all different.
Well, and you bring up a great point about job descriptions. There's two things I want to mention about that, is that job descriptions, one of the things I see, to your point, when it's a laundry list of items, right? A lot of job descriptions are written for the unicorn candidate that they will never find, right?
No.
Every job description, every modern e-learning instructional designer learning experience job description says you should know HTML5. Well, I don't know. I know what HTML5 is, but if I had to edit HTML5 or code, like I would, I couldn't code myself out of a bag if I had to. And the point is a lot of companies make job descriptions not for what they're going to really get, but this ideal candidate that they'll never find. And the reason why I say that is because when you see that, if you're a candidate looking for a job, don't let that hinder you from applying for that job, because you'll find out that, they want you to be an LMS admin, but really what they mean is they want you to know what an LMS is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, gosh, what was the other thing that you said that really
out, right? I mean, they'll look and they'll see that and they'll say, okay, no, they don't have enough strength in an area that I want. And then, kind of to your point, the onus on the company. I found out that there are folks that deal with, I'm really old, you guys, I used to say ding letters. So your rejection letters, but they just use the copy and paste, that is sent out. And I do, but sometimes I also add a line that's underneath it that says, I was looking for more experience in e-learning for our current needs, or I really needed XYZ, to try to give somebody a tip off. But I also recognize that not everybody does that when they send things out. So also don't look down on yourself too much. If you look and you just get the standard ding letter, they gave you a list of 20 things they wanted you to do. And really what they meant is that, man, you're going to do one participant guide and 20 e-learning courses, right? So they know what's in their head and you don't. So, okay, on to the next, and let's look and see if I'm the right fit someplace else.
Yeah. So before, I want to transition to talking about the actual, once you're in the room having the interview, what questions you ask and answer those. Before we do that, I'm curious to know, when you're evaluating a candidate, when they've submitted a resume. And I don't know if this is true for you, but when I was managing, when I was had positions open on my team and I was reviewing resumes, you get hundreds of them. And it's like finding a needle in the haystack to find the right candidate. But what are you looking for in terms of a resume or a portfolio? Like, what is, when you're just have 1,000 applications in front of you, what's your process for sorting through that to find what you want or who you want to interview?
So I do, I will tell you that the last position that I hired, probably the last two that I hired, over half of my resumes were from teachers, public school teachers, and a few professors, which kind of caught me off guard. So I look for a few things. I do look to see, I want to see that it looks interesting, which is a really vague, terrible thing to tell people. I look for visuals and how you've planned out your white space. So I do look for kind of visual basics. Not that you had to grab like something splashy or one of those no cute templates or something that's out on, Word now will give you 1,000 different templates to use. But I want to know that you've blocked it out well, that you've got good structure, and that it's easy to read. Because those are things that I'm going to want you to produce.
Is that because, to your point, that's because the design of that resume is an indicator of your design skills in general, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We have hired really experienced folks and folks that are less so. I like that my team every day continues to talk about their visual design skills and improve them. But if you're not paying enough attention to your resume and what's the core block and what's on there, then I don't want to start at that block, right? I like to start a little bit higher than that. So I look for that. I do look for targeted experience if I'm looking for particular tools or that you have some experience in those areas. I'm looking to see where your knowledge is related to your experience. What do you tell me already what kind of challenges you did? Can I tell if you're a critical thinker or that you're a problem solver? Or does it look, when I look through, that you were better at, here's my plan and I'm going to follow a plan? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it might not be the job that I had. If I had just an e-learning developer role where you were going to take a storyboard from someone else and then your job was to build it, okay. But if I'm looking for that whole package, then I'm kind of looking for those different things. And then there's the traditional stuff, right? I am probably a little bit more lenient on shorter times at jobs in the instructional design field because I have a lot of people that apply that have done contract work. And so they're not going to have, I was 5 years at that role. And then it really is about what kind of projects did you did? What kind of results did you get? Can you talk to me about your metrics?
Yeah.
For the school teachers, I think they have a great advantage in our field and that a lot of people fall into learning. You and I've talked about that with you, falling into this field from something else. They walk through the door and already have a good foundation of education around learning and learning theory. They just maybe aren't up to skilled on some of like our tools or the things we use. And then probably the biggest difference that I notice, and so if any of you out there are public school teachers looking to get into instructional design, the biggest difference I can tell you is that I also was a teacher and the curriculum was handed to me. Here is the curriculum you must follow. Here is your textbook. Here, and these days, the textbook companies, here's all the optional activities you can do. And I was a facilitator, right? So I was teaching, but I facilitated that information. No one on my team does any facilitation whatsoever. Right. So we are creating things for someone else to facilitate, and nobody hands us the curriculum. Nobody gives us those things. We have to go find the content in a lot of cases. We have to be able to dig through that and ask questions. And it's not about, okay, I know I teach 15-year-olds. Okay, so for us, are we working with a group of engineers or are we working with technicians that are out in the field? Are they lab people? Is this for people inside of our corporate office? All of those kinds of things are different for a corporate instructional designer. And probably out of interviews I've done with a lot of our public school teacher friends, they have thought about what they know about learning and that they know how to teach somebody something. And of course, I've done lesson plans. And so that will transfer. And I'm not saying it won't. I'm saying it needs a little bit more work than that. Yep. And you have to be able to do that work. And on a resume, I need to see what else you've done outside of your public school teaching or where you got involved that is going to help you get over that hurdle. Because we're
Yeah.
helpful once you're there, right?
Yeah.
But there is a real difference between the
Well,
two.
well, one of the things that you mentioned that resonated with me, and it's something I've been coaching with folks that I've been mentoring when they go into interviews, is the thing I always tell them is if you see something, if you think this is going to be perceived as a weakness, get ahead of it and spin it as a positive. And I'll give you a great example of how you just illustrated that as a potential option for teachers. If you're a school teacher or you're a classroom trainer wanting to get into instructional design and you've never done instructional design maybe for classroom training, you can admit, yes, I've never done that before. But here's how you spin it to a positive. You can say, but I know what it's like to be in the classroom and I know what teachers need or facilitators need in order to facilitate a great workshop. I can empathize with what that feels like and it gives me advantage when I'm designing it. Because the truth is, there's a lot of instructional designers who have to create training content for facilitators and they've never stepped in a classroom. They don't know what facilitators or teachers need. So you can take those things that might be perceived as a weakness and use as an opportunity and go, but this is my strength because I've done that, right? I can
Yeah,
empathize with what that's like, right?
absolutely. I actually have two former teachers out of my three instructional designers.
Yeah.
So two of them also have that teaching experience, and they are really good at writing those. Because for us at our company, all of our operations people are the people that are facilitators. So they
Yeah.
also are not people from L&D in general. It's an office manager. It's a field supervisor that is then taking a workshop guide they get from our team, and
Mm-hmm.
they go and they facilitate that content. And I would say that those two ladies on my team, they kick butt with that. And I think it is because of what you say, Tim.
Yeah.
They know that. I did ask them, by the way, a couple of the things that they did. One of them, who wanted to make that leap, she got an internship
Okay.
at a local company that had a learning position. And so her introduction into it, and she said she wanted to do e-learning. And so she got an internship and then she was doing kind of edits and rework of their courses. So she was kind of learning e-learning through deconstruction and being able to learn the tools that way. And she said it was a big, a big deal for her to do that. She leaned into, they were using Articulate. She leaned into the community. She said she started watching things on eLearning Heroes to see how people were putting it together and how they talked about it. She
Sure.
found a few people she wanted to follow on YouTube so that she would hear them talking about it and how they were doing it in a corporate environment. And then on the end, she said part of it was trial and error. She had this software. She's at her internship. She asked, "Can I go ahead and practice?" And they said, "Yeah, do whatever." So she did the eLearning Hero challenges so that
Mm-hmm.
she learned. So by the time that she comes and she interviews for a position with me, one, the person she was working for was a professional colleague through ATD. And they said, absolutely, she's a go-getter. You want to interview her.
Yep.
So that was awesome. But beyond that, Deb, for me, got into that second interview where I have them show their work,
Mm-hmm.
either by an assignment that we give them a challenge and then they bring that, or you can bring something that you have. So you can bring part of your portfolio, or you can, but I also want you to meet this challenge and show your process, be able to show me that you know how to do the needs assessment and all of that. And then in addition, then I'll really see how do you put stuff together with your visual. And Deva said she would never been able to do that had she not spent that prep time on her own, saying, I need to be able to show I can do this, not just have somebody believe in me. And
Sure.
obviously she did, right? She is a great designer. She also sent me a little note and said, after she came with us, she took your course. So she said,
Oh,
give Tim a shout out
thank you.
because your course and your book that I bought for her when she came on board was really crucial for her then to put all the points together. So the skills were there. It just
Yeah.
took a polish. So she said, thanks for that, because
Thank
that was
you.
part of her continued learning.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's so sweet. Um, well, tell her thank you. I
I will.
appreciate that. Yeah. So let's talk about the actual interview moment. And I kind of want to
Yep.
skip over real quickly. I'm going to skip over the recruiter or the recruiter interview. Like the initial interview is usually the 30-minute recruiter interview. The reason why I'm going to skip that over is, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, Heidi. 95% of the time, the recruiter interview is for, I'm going to say 2 or 3 things. First, they just want to make sure you're not a crazy person. They want to make sure you're a real person, because they get a
True.
lot of fake resumes. A lot of times the recruiter doesn't really know anything about the job that they're recruiting for. They can't answer any detailed questions. And
True.
sometimes they're just validating salary requirements to make sure you're within budget. It's a weeding out process to figure out who are we going to pass off to the hiring manager.
No, that
So
sounds so sad though, doesn't it?
it is sad. It's true. I mean, most
But
recruiter
yeah,
interviews are just making sure like you're a sane, happy person who would be a good fit for the company culture. You fit within the budget, and
yeah,
it's a way to filter out non-serious candidates before they hand over to the hiring manager. Would you agree with
yeah.
that to
I
an
do. Or
extent?
they're because I have to do my own.
Oh,
I
okay.
would put to then, like we said on the job description. So if ours was a little fluffy, but like if I know that some of the initial projects I'm going to assign you to, or I would say to my recruiter, hey, first few things out the gate are going to be in this area. So I don't really have time for them to grow in this
Yeah.
spot. I need them to have it. And then they'll ask questions about their, to kind of nail that. Um, but yes, I would say probably even for me, same questions of every candidate, and they are designed to tell me where are you in your skill level, and then how do you talk about your former coworkers?
Hmm.
How do you talk about the folks around you, and then what kind of an environment you want? And that for me tells me, okay, yep, that needs to go to the next level.
Yeah.
Because if they're looking, for instance, if they told our recruiter or myself that they're looking for a role where they just get to do it from start to finish and they do everything and they're solely by themselves and they like to be that single contributor, that's wonderful. It's
Yep.
not a job I have for you.
Right.
So those kinds of questions where we can, as you say, weed out, but can kind of pull some of that out.
Well, and I think so. If there's any advice about that first initial 30-minute phone call recruiter interview, is be enthusiastic,
Mm-hmm,
be honest about where you're at,
mm-hmm.
and illustrate that you're really curious and you have a lot of questions. Because if the more times you can get that recruiter to go, you know what, that's probably a question you need to ask the hiring manager, then maybe they'll be more likely to give you a chance to ask those questions to the hiring manager. Because you're showing
It says you're
actual
interested in the
interest.
job.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
actually interested in this position because you've come with questions,
Right.
uh, which, by the way, is another way to weed people out.
Yeah.
If you don't have questions prepped, our recruiter, she recruits for my director, and she has said you won't get through to the next level because when you say no, I don't really have any questions, they interpret that you
Oh,
aren't really interested.
I totally agree. So let's talk about the interview. So
Yep.
let's start with that. Yeah, let's kind of starting at the end. My biggest pet peeve when I was a hiring manager was when candidates, 2 things. A, if they didn't have any questions, ugh,
Mhm.
that was a big turnoff for me.
Me too.
That's almost kills it for me. Because I want to know, I want you to be so curious about this job and curious about the team and everything. The second pet peeve I have is when the questions are really superficial. Like they're asking the questions that the article they Googled told them to ask. I want to know the questions I like to know and the questions I ask when I interview. Whenever I interview, I ask as a hiring manager, I go, Heidi, you're my hiring manager. Heidi, what's the thing that keeps you up at night in this role? What's the thing that's going to keep me up at night in this role? What's the biggest challenges you're facing and how am I going to help you solve them? What does my 30, 60, 90 days look like in this role? And I'm not asking questions that are about me and how you're going to benefit me, because that's the other thing I don't particularly ask is it's okay to ask questions about your growth, but when it's only focused on your growth, or it sounds selfish. And so I
Right.
want to know uh, how is my being here going to help you achieve your goals, and that helps you feel good because it means that candidate wants to know how they can help, right? I mean, what kind of questions do you want candidates to ask?
Yeah, but it also sets you apart because if I have forgotten to ask something,
Yeah.
or you mentioned before, if somebody hasn't particularly written the job description very well and they haven't really emphasized the things that they want, they might not be a very good interviewer. And if they're not, by your approach, you are helping them ask you the questions that you've already prepared to answer,
Yep.
right?
Right.
So because then you're listening for, oh, so they do a lot of e-learning work and oh, they're an articulate house. here's how I would meet that challenge, or here's the skills I bring to the table and where I can be an asset to that.
And as a
Or,
candidate,
you
and
know,
as a candidate, you're also using that as an opportunity to suss out whether or not this place has their shit together. And do you want to be there, right? You know? Um,
right. I mean,
I
if the nightmare is that you have to constantly turn out projects in a 48-hour time period, you should all run. Hear me now,
right.
just
Yes.
run. Not saying that your answer should be, well, no, I need a full 6 months, because that is also not reality.
Right.
But you do want to know, am I juggling more than 2 projects at a time, or 3? Who
Yep.
are the different types of people that I'm going to be working with? You want to ask about what that general environment is. I mean, Tim, I have had people ask questions, like they get to the end, they think it's, we've had a good discussion. And so then it's like, well, what are the desks like in the office? Now, I'm not saying that you might not want to know that, but if those are the questions you
That's
have
not the
in early
moment for
interview
that.
stage,
Yeah. Yeah.
I am not focused there or on any of those kinds of things.
I mean,
I want you to know what the team's going to be like, right?
yeah, by the time you get to the point where you, and this is my feeling, by the time you as a candidate are getting to the point where you can ask questions, that's when really, like, the charade is over, and that's when the interview really begins. That's when you're building a relationship and you're having a conversation. Yeah. And the sooner you can start having that conversation in the interview, the better the interview is. I mean, one time I had an interview. I was interviewing at a place, and I got to the final interview, and I knew this was going to be like the blessing interview where we're going to probably follow up with an offer. And they scheduled it for like 15 minutes. And I called the recruiter, and I was like, no. I need an hour and a half because I have a lot of questions. And they were really taken aback by it. But, I wanted to make sure it was the right fit for me. And it was kind of like, excuse my language, this was like the no bullshit. We're going to have a real conversation about this job and my place in it. And you're going to ask me a bunch of questions. And it made me feel really good about taking the job. And it made the employer feel really great about hiring me. I'm not saying everybody go ask for an hour and a half interview at the end of the process, but it's your time
but you
too,
want to
right?
make sure that you have time. So if
Yeah.
your pre-interviews have been ones where you did not have time,
Yep.
right? They scheduled enough questions that they, as a hiring manager, were going to ask that filled that full 45 minutes to an hour, and you didn't have time to ask questions, like they ask you at the end, but we both know it's just kind of perfunctory, then you need to say, hey, I have some other questions. What would be an appropriate way to follow up with you on those?
Sure.
I have a friend who's interviewing right now, even in the OD environment, but nevertheless, after she left an interview, she thought, I really kind of want to know these few things, because those are keys for me wanting to go on with this, company. And she's like, what do you think, you guys? And we said, send it. And so she sent a note, and the hiring manager called her right away and said, oh, here, let me answer those for you. I'm sorry that we didn't have a chance to do that before. Yeah. So most of us as hiring managers, we want you to feel like this is the right fit, because quite frankly, we do not want to have you come on board, be unhappy, and then leave in 90 days. And then we are back to interviewing.
And it's exhausting when that happens. It's hard.
Yes. Yeah. So we want to get it right. Right?
Yep.
So to come with your questions. And then I know everybody says it. The other thing I would tell you that our recruiters, what they will do, so at least ours, they also will ask behavioral questions. Mm-hmm. And they, kind of to your point, I'm not sure all the time that they would be able to understand everything maybe that's described to them, because they don't do the work. They want to know that you had an answer.
Yes.
They want to know that you did not give an answer to what was your greatest challenge that is so soap opera. It's just roses and cream that you're like, okay, that was fabulous. Now tell me the real example. Mm-hmm. Now tell me something about the real challenge that you faced and how did you deal with it? Because our work is full of difficult subject matter experts, incredibly difficult timelines.
Yep.
Really hard stakeholders that are going to draw on this line in the sand and say, you have to produce this. And I don't really care if you agree or not. And okay, so you're an expert in your field, but that's great. I want X.
Well, I think to your point with the behavioral questions, and let's discuss this, and then we'll tackle the
Yeah.
questions, and maybe some more of that stuff comes up. The behavioral questions that get asked during interviews. I think you make a great point about not only the recruiter and then also the hiring manager. They're not looking for a case study. You don't need to plan and script a whole case study. And the way I would challenge people to rethink your answers to those is they want to hear stories. Think of a story. We have all sorts of stories when I had to work with a difficult stakeholder or a difficult parent or a difficult principal or a difficult whoever, a subject matter expert, a coworker. Just tell that story. And it's what was the challenge you were facing? How did you deal with the challenge? And what resulted of that? And it's, think of it as the stories you would go tell your friends when you're having a drink after work about that stakeholder that pissed you off, and and construct that into the
Yes.
story, right?
Yeah. Or my team comes in. So my instructional designers come in on one of the interviews, and they're there when they review work. So they see your portfolio as well, because I think they are all highly skilled, and I rely on them to
Yep.
also give me good feedback on that, right?
Yep.
And one thing that one of my folks said is that he doesn't like when somebody gives that example or they tell that story, and you can tell that they've just dropped in every buzzword that they know from the industry. And so it feels less genuine
Mhm.
than really letting us see a part of yourself. So I think, you know, to me, it's do you seem real when you come for the interview? Are
And
you
even
giving me real examples that are telling me challenges, and even where, hey, I'm still working on
yep.
how to get through these kinds of situations, as opposed to, like I said, maybe it's personal, Tim. I don't like the ticked and tied, right? I don't like it where it's perfect. I'm not looking for your perfect answer. I'm looking for your real one.
Yeah, and also, and maybe the answer is I had this issue and I failed, and that's okay too. That's another opportunity to go. I failed. This is what I learned from it. This is how I'm doing it differently in the future. That's a win. You
Yes.
know, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I know you're working on it. I will say that that is the last thing, because we were talking about people's resumes and what they put in it and all that kind of stuff. And those initial interviews, the other thing I am looking for is, are you continuing to learn? Or are
Right.
you applying for this job because you decided I have these skills and I know how to tell my stories and I know how to do that? But then when I ask, you know, who are learners in the professional, or who other professionals in the field that you follow, or whose books have you read? What recent book have you read on our stuff, or what article? Doesn't have to be a
Yep.
book. Maybe you're not, maybe you tell me,
Yep.
oh God, 300 pages, can't get there. Great. So what articles are you reading? How are you staying up on your craft? And if they don't really have good answers for that, then at least for me, you're in my no pile.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let's transition to the questions. I'm in the questions tab now. Heidi, you don't have to do anything. I'll tackle the questions, but
Okay.
you can click over there if you want to see them. We're gonna tackle the questions in terms of who's received the most upvotes, and we'll try to get through as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
So Gabby wants to know. Hi, Gabby. Gabby wants to know, what do you look for when reviewing a portfolio? What are your thoughts on that, Heidi?
Actually had the opportunity to do so recently for a local university that we do some things with. Same kind of things I'm looking for on a resume, right? That we talked about. How is it blocked out? How have you chosen to visually present your portfolio overall? It does give us an opportunity, you guys, to give Tim a nice shout out because of the way that he's done his portfolio for years. I know you've been presenting on it a lot lately and sharing a lot of really great information about how to put that together.
Mm.
But you said it. We've been friends for a long time, and I've watched how you put those together. It's visually pleasing. It tells me that you understand color theory. It tells me that you understand how to communicate information. And really, I'm looking for examples of your work. And it's amazing to me how many portfolios don't have real examples of your work, or don't tell me anything about how you approach a project. So I
Sure.
also kind of want to see that so that I know, is this probably a good fit for us, uh, or not?
For me, I agree with that, Heidi. For me, Gabby, mine's a little different. I agree with everything you said, Heidi. What I'm looking for when I look at a portfolio is I want to know, do you know, as the candidate, what you're really good at and what kind of work you want to be doing? And does that align with what I'm looking for? I don't like portfolios where it's full of everything under the sun, because then I go, what's this person's specialty? Are they a storyline developer? Do they make infographics? Or what do they do? What's their niche? And so I'm looking for, I would rather see one or two really fantastic examples that highlight what you want to be doing, what you love doing, what you're really good at doing, what you want to be hired to be doing, rather than a bunch of mediocre stuff. You see like this shotgun approach where people think it's quantity that's going to get them noticed rather than quality. And so I'm looking for specific examples, dependent, contextual to what I'm hiring for, that shows your best work, even if it's one or two examples. That's my take. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I would say yours was always that way with your portfolio, right? The young person that we were looking
Not always, but recently it used to be not that.
What kind of looked at, she had presented her project.
Sure.
And she was coming out of a certificate program. So the one thing I will tell you is that we didn't necessarily need to see her coursework. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's nice but I kind of assumed if you went through that program that you've done the coursework. I wanted to know more about her project, which was a blended approach, which did have a piece to it. So I still wanted to see those things. But how did your blend fit together, and were you able to explain that so that we know that you know how to put stuff together? Yep. I think it's just probably as important, kind of to your point, Tim, what you leave out of your portfolio is probably just as important as what you put in it.
Yep. Good. All right. Our next question comes from Monica. Hey, Monica, I've been meaning to drop you a note. Monica wants to know how long is a typical hiring process for a corporate ID position? Oh, Heidi, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I got to tell you that it varies. For us, it's kind of that initial, right? So that initial screen, and to get through, and then a deeper conversation. And then you come in and we have a show your work interview with coworkers. And then you have to interview with a director. And then actually my chief people officer, to his credit, interviews everybody in our department. Mm-hmm. And I still love that, because that person, kind of like your hour and a half of questions, he sees that fit, but he also lets them know, hey, is this the place for you? Yep. But that whole process can be 4 to 5 weeks. It could be 6, kind of depends, because then you're juggling schedules. Friend of mine right now that's doing interviewing, it has been all about schedules, and 2 people on a team here that they interviewed with, and then to a hiring director. So most folks I talk to these days, and Tim, I don't know if you're hearing the same thing, it's probably at least 4 or more interviews before you get through that final gate. I
mean, I feel like it can become ridiculous how long it can take. From having been on that side, I mean, just to give you context, because when you're waiting to hear back, you create all sorts of stories in your head about what's happening, right? And what's really happening 9 times out of 10 is, first, with the recruiter, they're not only interviewing several people for your job, Heidi, maybe if you're hiring, but probably they're supporting 7 other managers, and they're on phone screens all day. So then that happens. Then they have to filter out all those phone screens and then present all those resumes to the hiring manager. That easily that's another week and a half. You're reviewing those, then you're deciding who you want to interview. So then you're sending that back to the recruiter to schedule those. Okay, there's a whole nother week because they're doing that with other managers. Then you, Heidi, as the hiring manager, you're planning your interview strategy. So you're working with your boss's boss, maybe a stakeholder, maybe your team, trying to figure out, okay, who's going to interview in what order. And then you're trying to get schedules, and then the recruiter's calling the candidate to set those schedules, and then they're working with all of your schedules. That could take another 3 weeks, and then you're just do the first interview. And then you know who's going to do the second interview. Then by the time you get down to your last 2 candidates, and you're ready to figure out who you're going to offer, then there's maybe that blessing interview that happens, and then you want to make the offer. Well, nobody has the offer ready to go. That usually has to get drafted by HR, and then it has to go all the way up the chain. And then it might come back down the chain and go, no, you're off. We don't have that in budget. And then it goes back up the chain and then back down the chain. And then by time it finally makes it to you, the candidate, you know, you're 6, 7, 8 weeks in sometimes. And then people are on vacation, people are sick, people's emails don't go through, you know, it's so. Excuse my language.
It wasn't a cheery answer from us, Tim. We did not have a cheery answer on that. But it is, like you said, you're putting yourself through a lot of emotions that you're letting, it's a wonderful thing IDs are creative and we're imaginative. It doesn't always help us in this situation. And we'd like to say that you're getting hired as our number one priority as a hiring manager. We are only focused on that thing. No, we're also doing our day job, so to speak. And so then it has to fit in things. And so I don't think anybody would ever say that they ever do it to be mean. But also, if you send me an email yesterday and I don't get to it for 2 days, it's because you're one of 55. And so, or 100 that day that come through, and I'm just sorting. So it sounds awful. And I hate that you need to know that you just got to take a breath. I realize that it may be a few weeks before you hear back.
It rarely means anything if you're not hearing something.
Yep.
And so, and don't get me wrong, there are employers out there that ghost candidates all the time. They're horrible. And it shouldn't be a long process. There shouldn't be so much bureaucracy. It's just how it is. And so my advice for Monica, if you're waiting to hear back and it's been a couple weeks, drop the recruiter an email. Just send a note, say, hey, I'm checking in. What's the deal? Don't overstress it. It's okay. And it might take a day to hear it back, or you might not hear back. It typically doesn't mean anything.
Especially because now a lot of people have stuff like in Indeed or in LinkedIn or in a lot of these different spaces. So if they're looking, they see it right away, right? Oh, they have an opening. And so you apply right away. We may have just posted that position in the last 24 hours. So I probably won't start pulling those resumes for a week, so that it gives a little bit more time for it to get out there, for people to see it, for us to post it several places. But in your mind, you're like, oh, I've just seen this and I've applied, and you have no idea where we are in that process.
And you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how far up the food chain a lot of companies are required to go to be approved, especially when it's like a new position and new budget. I've had times where it goes up to the CEO or the chief people officer or the number 2 in the company or the CFO, so that they can just go, yeah, we're willing to spend that $75,000 on that candidate or whatever the case might be, right? That seems ridiculous, and it is. It's just the nature of corporate BS red tape.
Because we're overhead.
Yep.
Right? We're part of the service part. We're not part of the money-making part, although I would argue that we have a huge influence on that. We are still looked at as an expense.
Yeah. So. Yep. All right, good. Thank you, Monica. Okay, next question comes from Liz. Hey, Liz. Liz wants to know, I have such a hard time with cover letters. Any tips? So I think it was Amy Petrayak I did one of these sessions with a few weeks ago, or it might have been Erica Zimmer. You can go back and look on my YouTube channel, but she gave a great tip about cover letters, because I don't like cover letters either. I kind of just have a standard format, but what she does in her cover letters is she has fun with it. She's like, hey, I'm really interested in this, and here's 5 reasons why you should interview me. And makes it fun and enjoyable. I don't know. I mean, as a hiring manager, I really didn't spend much time on cover letters. I don't know about you, Heidi. I say just have fun and be yourself. But Heidi, what are your thoughts?
I do kind of like them, but this is funny. I was just talking to my daughter last night, who's writing one for a class because she has to do one for an internship. And so some of the examples she was looking at, I looked at the first 2 and said, I can see that on your resume. So I don't need your cover letter to tell me what I can already read in your resume, because if that's all you're going to tell me, then don't send me a cover letter.
Yep.
If instead you really looked at our job description and you're looking and saying, hey, these 2 things they're really looking for, I knocked that out of the park. And my resume shows my experience in that, but I can highlight that in a cover letter to say, I've got experience in this. And then yes, to show that side of yourself. Those cover letters always attract my attention. And then I usually put those folks on a slate that they'll at least get through the interview process.
Yeah.
So, but if you send me the general ones where you're not really telling me anything, then that I can't already see in your resume, then you're wasting my time and I don't need to look, and you didn't need to write it.
Yeah, agreed. Last thing I'll say about that too is if you have a portfolio or a link to your LinkedIn, make sure you link to that on your cover letter, on your resume and your LinkedIn, that they can click on and go to it. Nobody's going to manually type in unless they're really interested in you. They want to click and go to it. So make sure you link to it. So,
yeah.
Okay, great. Jennifer wants to know, I'm new to the field and I have a hard time with the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do you approach that? Oh, I love this one because I hate that question as well. You know how I answer it? and this is true. I tell the hiring manager, heck if I know. I don't know where I see myself in 5 years, and here's why. I say, and I make it a story. I tell the story about, like, I fell into this industry by accident. I couldn't have told you 5 years ago that I would be here, and I'm not going to try and have a crystal ball where I'm going to be back in 5 years. Here's what I do know, though. This is the kind of work I want to be doing. This is the kind of team I want to work on. This is the kind of skills I want to be applying. And whether that's with you or another employer, that's where I see myself. That's how I answer it. Heidi,
I
what do you
think
think?
that was perfect. I have
Yes.
absolutely nothing to add. I don't ask that question, by the way,
Yeah.
because I couldn't tell anybody on my team that I have already what we're going to create in 5 years. The only thing I can guarantee them right now is that we have a 3-year cycle in reviewing content to see if it needs to be refreshed.
And
But
if
outside of that,
and here's the thing, if the hiring manager is asking that question as a got you question so that you say, I see myself here promoted in your team, if that's what they're wanting to hear, that's such an egotistical thing to be expecting, and you probably don't want to work for them anyways.
well,
Yeah. So talk about, like, where you see yourself with your skills, what you want work you want to be doing, what kind of team you want to be on. That's the right way to answer it, in my opinion.
yep, mine too.
Good. That was easy.
That was
Charlotte
easy.
wants to know, is it necessary to have a portfolio? Your thoughts, Heidi? I say yes, but I'm curious to know what you think.
So I told you that we're an e-learning house. So would I like to see it? Yes. But I'm going to say that it depends on who's hiring you, and it depends on what they're looking for, and it also depends on what they're looking for in the makeup of their team. So is it easier when I can see your e-learning portfolio and that you have things? Absolutely, because I can already see samples of your work. And even if you've only put out some projects like out like on a LinkedIn page where I can see some of your graphics or things like that, that has a huge advantage. But I also told you that I've hired teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And interviewed folks that maybe they don't have corporate work to show me, or they're in an industry where they literally cannot show
Sure.
anything that they created. So I offer them an opportunity to create something. And
Yep.
this is, since I told you I had 2 teachers on my staff, right? They came into it and didn't really have something out the gate. One of them said that 30-day trial that a lot of these different tools will give you to create a sample that then you can publish for web and then put in a portfolio was how they were able to get something when they weren't going to invest in certain software and stuff because they weren't financially able to. But they
Yep.
made the effort to show me that they know how to do the work that we were asking them to do. I had a candidate that brought theirs in a binder with just printed like what she had created. But what I could tell from that is how she did needs assessment, how she laid her things out, what she thought about her visual design. So it wasn't it wasn't a Wix site or something like that for her portfolio, but she could still show her work. And I think so for me, and I am a big proponent of portfolios, but I'm probably a heavier one of can you just show me anything that shows me your work so that I can really see what to expect and what we need to grow,
Yeah.
which I might be willing to do.
I think that's the key answer. It's not necessarily about having an online website. When
Yeah.
we say portfolio, it means having examples to show. My
Yeah.
first portfolio was a literal pamphlet that I printed out, and I burnt examples to a CD and I put it in a CD sleeve. But that was before, it was easy to post things online. You'd be amazed at, this has been in my experience, at least, you'd be amazed at how few candidates have portfolios or examples of work. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's always going to get you to the front of the line for me, because
Absolutely.
anybody can put on their resume, they can use storyline or that they can salsa dance. But if I'm hiring a salsa dancer, you're going to bet I want to see them salsa dance,
I
or
see
I
it.
want to see them use storyline, right? So yeah. Okay. So that, I think that answers that question, but I think this is a good segue to our next question. This might be our last one. Christy wants to know, how common is it to have to create a project during the interview process? What type of
Mm.
projects do they ask for? Those are assignments that you give, Heidi. For me, when I was interviewing, we always gave an assignment.
Okay.
Uh, and that's kind of a controversial thing. If you see people talk about it online, but I'll let you, Heidi, what do you do, and why do you do it?
I do it as well. I do allow them to bring finished. Initially, I used to always have somebody just bring finished work, and now I ask for both. So now I offer them an opportunity to create something and bring it, and I give them the objectives. I tell them how long it needs to be. I mean, we try to give them as much parameters because I don't want it to be a hardship for you. I want you to be able to show me how you would put stuff together. They have full access to talk to our team. But again, I told you I have a friend that's looking, and she's in a process now, and I think it's about like her third interview. She was asked to do a presentation. And so she also was asked, because they want to see what is her facilitation skills for us.
Yep.
I want to see your design skills. I want to see your thought process and how you're putting something together and what that's going to look like. And again, Tim, I don't know if this was true for you as well. You had a large team. I have a smaller one, but still that level that I'm looking for, it depends on the person, because there's all these other things that you bring to the table on top of your portfolio or this project that we're going to say, oh, that's the right person for us. And you might be here in your skills, or you might be here. And we just all look at each other and go, we can grow that. So, but it's being able to take the challenge and being able to address something. So I have it for every one of my designers. They are asked to do a quick project. We at least try to make it to where it's not like, you're spending hours and hours on pictures.
I mean, the onus is on the employer to make that reasonable.
Yes.
You're not doing free work. It's something you should spend maybe a couple hours on. The reason why I did that as a hiring manager is, just as people can lie on resumes, people can lie in portfolios. I have seen portfolios where people have applied for jobs on my team, and the examples in their portfolio were templates that I had created. I don't want to see you use the template. I want to see original work. And so I view portfolios as powerful as they are. They're kind of similar. It's like, when you go on someone's Instagram page and they show this curated version of their life that's not really real. Sometimes that exists with portfolios too. And so I want to see, how do you handle being under pressure, under a time constraint, working with content you may not be familiar with? You may come back with a really messy prototype in PowerPoint, but at least I'm going to be able to see your thinking, right? And I'm going to be able to ask you questions about it. It doesn't have to be perfect or polished or beautiful, if that's not what I'm looking for, but it lets me see how you act under pressure.
And a lot of times it's also a place that, like, a lot of candidates have sent me a couple qualifying questions. And that also lets me know that's exactly how you'd work with one of our SMEs, right? Is that you have to ask those questions. It lets me also see the quality of the questions and how you're trying to clarify your information in order to produce something. But for us, it's a standard. My team works collaboratively, and they also they critique one another's work. So the other thing I'm looking for, if you bring that back, so if you're going to bring something back and they tell you there's going to be lots of people in the room, be aware that they are also looking to see how you take criticism or how you take somebody trying to improve your idea. And if you are, oh, this is mine, and I can't take that and incorporate that, or say, oh, Tim, that was such a great idea, I would love to put it here. What do you think? You're not going to make it on our team, because you have to be able to take that. And in reality, you're going to take that from your SME or your stakeholder on their product as well. So if you're being asked to take something there and then they're going to critique it, they are also watching, how are you really going to handle that in your role?
Yes, that is such an important point. I totally agree with that. All right, so before we wrap up real quickly, I'm going to put a couple things in chat. First, thank you also for those awesome questions. We have tons of questions we didn't get a chance to get to, but if I might say, of course, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or in the community. And Heidi, I'm sure if you're okay with it, people following up with you.
Absolutely.
Let me put a couple things in chat. First, feel free to join us inside the eLearning Designers community. I just put that in chat. It's completely free. It's an online community for anyone looking to grow their e-learning skills career. Feel free to check out the eLearning Designers Academy. That's my website, blog, our course content for those of you looking to learn storyline, build your portfolio, grow your career, your skill set. And if you want to check out our full schedule of our future sessions, next week we have Cami Bean on talking about being an accidental instructional designer. You can check out the full schedule there. So Heidi, if people want to connect with you, you already did it. You put it in Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find Heidi online.
Absolutely. You can find me. More than happy to engage or ask questions if we didn't get to you today. But thank you, Tim. It was fun.
It was so much fun. You're so fantastic.
Oh, ditto.
Yeah.
What is this? The Mutual Appreciation Society
Oh.
between the two of us, but really, really appreciate the opportunity. And I
Yeah.
wish all of you well that are currently looking. There are loads of postings out there for instructional design work right now, but make sure you're investing in yourself and
Yep.
doing the work so that you can show your stuff.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Heidi. You have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.